everyone, as part of this series of videos, we're going to be talking to you about Introduction to Security Best Practices. Now, this is a multi-part video series, and this is part one, which is Introduction to Security Best Practices. We're going to be looking at the next, which is implementing network security. We're going to go over then to managing access to identity with Azure Entra ID, and then we're going to look at securing data with key vault and encryption, and monitoring and responding to security threats. So first, let's go into what are container apps. And a quick refresh, this series is on container apps, on securing with the best practices. So they're serverless containers for microservices, and it lets you to have real control over your containers and how they interact with each other though. And they focus on the apps, and they're very developer friendly. Now, when you have your container, you want to go and you want to develop your application, code, build, store, and then you want to create a container out of that code, and then you want to deploy it to a cluster. So you want to deploy it, and really container apps runs Kubernetes underneath it though, and you want to have policy-based deployment control. And then finally, you want to run it though, you want to continuously scan that, and then also have runtime security. So develop, deploy, and run. But you also, at the same time, don't want to include security risks. And one of those real hard things to do is get rid of your secrets. So you want to verify explicitly. So you want to make sure you know who and what is logging in and using your system. You want to use least privilege access. And you want to assume a breach. You want to make sure that everything is locked down. And at the same time, what do you do when you have your deployment of your cluster? You want to use Azure Firewall to make sure that the only people getting in and the only people getting out are the ones that you specify. And to do that, really, you want to create a virtual network. So the first thing you want to do, you want to take your containers, you want to create a virtual network around it there, so you can have more access to what comes in and out. Now, once you have that virtual network and that firewall, then you can actually go in and you can create, wait a second, you're only allowed to go out there, use a defined route to go out, and use a defined route to go in, making sure that the app and also the people that you're aware of it. And you can also do that on the network layer to make sure that, wow, I'm going to block these IP addresses and I'm going to block these ports via the firewall. So once you have that and it's locked down, then you can start with authorization. And we really have a great tool, Entra ID, that works seamlessly with container apps. And what that allows you to do is use managed identities to access the Azure OpenAI services or the Azure services, and then at the same time, your container apps, and then also define, if you want to, your custom identities to make sure that you have low-level access to that. Once you have your custom identities, you can see that there's Alice, there's Bob, and you can lock it down that only Bob can access the storage account and Alice can access the subscription. And you can make sure that Bob doesn't necessarily get to do what Alice needs to do, and vice versa. So in the classic example we have, though, we have a web app and we have a container app. And you can see that the container app, and we'll look at this more in our demo, only can access the monitoring, the storage, and also the key vault though. The web app, what can it access? Really nothing. It can access the container app, the API act there. So it enables you to also have low-level access control with those managed identities to make sure that your different containers access different and specified resources. And in the demo, we're going to see the API, the web, and the indexer in our example. So we also want to make sure that you have a edge ingress proxy to make sure that you can encrypt everything. So in this example here, we have Azure Container Apps, Container App A, accesses B, and throughout that entire process, we're encrypting the traffic to make sure that you can't and no one can intercept that traffic though. So here's another nice example. We'll see a little bit more in the demo. We have the user-assigned identities here. This is where you can get the user-assigned identity. And here we've specified a unique identity called Music Store User Identity, which can only access the music store in that example. So once we have all of that, we've got our virtual network app, we've got a user managed identity, and then we've got our containers running. We want to monitor it, and we do that with Security Center. And Security Center will tell us, hey, there's some issues you need to resolve. We also do that with Microsoft Sentinel. So Microsoft Sentinel will go, whoa, you should actually use these tools to make sure that you are aligned. So, and finally, we rinse and repeat. We go preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. And then we rinse and repeat that to make sure that we can have incident activity. We understand that. And then we can report on that. So what are we going to do next? We're going to look at our very simple demo. You can go to aka.ms/awesomeazd. And we're going to be downloading a 3-tiered container app environment. It's got a web app, it's got an API app, and it's got an indexer. And the indexer, you can see there, has access to the underlying search services, the document intelligence, and takes some documents, loads them up into the search service, and then says to the AI, hey, why don't you go in and search this? Now, through that process, the only one who really has, extensive access to this is the API app, because the API needs to, wait a second, get access to the underlying AI search, the underlying Azure OpenAI, and also the storage account. And then the web just needs to chat to the users, so we're not too worried about that. And the nice thing about this example is if you want to really lock it down, there is an example there that uses front door to lock it down into separate VNets for hub and spoke. And I'm going to show that at another time. So let's go into the demo. And I'm going to just Alt tab here, and let's go into here. So this is the demo here, and you can see here, you can specify some developer settings. You can use semantic kernel if you want. And then I'm going to say, it's already ingested the data there. What does a product manager do? And it goes in and gets all that information. So what's happening here is the web is serving up the HTML, but the API access has specified user credentials to go in there and make sure that it can access the AI search. And we can see that then if you go into your portal here, this is the API Azure role assignments here, and it's got the search indexes data reader, the storage blob data reader, and the cognitive services API user readers. So that's everything of the best practices we're going to do. So what is in store for the next sessions? And you can access the demo over there, but you can also access it in Azure OpenAI. So what we're going to go and we're going to touch on quite a little bit more as we progress through this series. We're going to look at, again, the importance of security. I've kind of already sold it to you. You want to make sure you lock it down. You use least privilege access, zero trust. You authenticate, you authorize, and then we're going to touch on monitoring and management using Sentinel, using Azure Monitor. So the resources, you can get yourself started there. You can go to the Azure Application Containerization and Deployment. You can look at Azure Container Apps Documentation. And I want to remind you to a lot of this we're going to be covering in JDConf. Go and register in JDConf. Like I said, this is a multi-part series here. So we want to make sure that you like and subscribe and go and look at the rest of the sessions. Thank you, and cheers, everyone.